So I'm delighted today to be joined by three guests. Linsay Chalmers, who's Development Manager at Community Land Scotland, Linda Gillespie, Programme Manager at Community Ownership Support Service, part of Development Trust Association Scotland, and Sarah-Jane Allsopp from Castle Douglas Development Forum, just up the road from me, which is great. So always good to see the south of Scotland well represented and biased. So really good session. We're going to start off with Linsay. We do record the sessions, so you can watch again if there's anything you miss or you want to recap or share with colleagues. And we also encourage you to post all of your questions in the chat or the Q&A, and I'll be keeping an eye on those. And what we'll do once all of our presenters have done their slots for today, we'll open it up and go to Q&A. So without holding you back any further, Linsay, we're all good to go, and I hope you really enjoy today's session. Thanks a lot.
Okay, thanks, Naomi. I'm just going to share my screen. So I'm Linsay Chalmers. I'm the Development Manager for Community Land Scotland, and we're the representative organisation for community landowners. And before I start, it might be useful for me to say, what we think community landowners are. So they tend to be geographic communities, so place-based, and they have open membership to anyone living in that community normally, and they're communities that own land or own buildings. So a quick overview of community land ownership. So the movement really started because Scotland's got the most unequal land ownership in the developed world, with about 0.02% of people owning half of Scotland's land. So that was the driver in the beginning of the movement. But what some of the early buyouts like the Isle of Egg and the Isle of Gigha were able to show was that once communities got ownership of their land, they were able to make really significant changes, even in small communities like Egg, which only had just over 60 people living there at the time of their buyout. So it's really been that kind of control and ability to change things that's been the driver for community landowners since then. There's over 400 communities that own land or buildings in Scotland now, and the capital of community land ownership is really the Western Isles, where 3/4 of people live on community owned land. So they've had a real domino effect where one community after another has purchased an estate. The movement started in the northwest of Scotland, but we've seen it spread, particularly in the last 5 years, to the south of Scotland. Particularly, you might have seen a lot of the glue buyouts in the news recently, but also urban Scotland as well. So it really has become a national movement now. So communities can purchase land, and there's three main ways that they can do it. So I'm just going to give a very brief overview of that. So the three main routes are through negotiations. So for private purchases, negotiation is still by far the most common route, where you have a landowner or a building owner that's happy to sell to the community. It can still be, not an entirely straightforward process, but it's relatively simple. And there are also now 4 legislative routes for communities to buy land through community right to buy. Those are really kind of backstop. There aren't a huge number of communities that have used community right to buy, but it's really there as a protection for communities to try and balance the human rights of communities with the property rights of landowners. And we would say that a lot of negotiated sales happen in the shadow of the law. So the community right to buy existing has made landowners think differently about whether or not they'll sell to communities. And then the third one is asset transfer, which is most common from public bodies. So Linda Gillespie, who's talking after me, is the expert on that and the service that DTAS provides to communities wanting to go through the asset transfer process. And Linda will be able to talk about it in more depth than me. So one of the things that we have been really spending a lot of time on in the last kind of 5 or 6 months is looking to see how communities have been responding to the COVID challenge. So many of the communities that we work with, they have purchased the land or building because they've had a really strong driver. Something that's happened locally. It could be a primary school closing down. It's made them think we want to buy land so we can actually make some changes that will reverse depopulation. It could be loss of green space or community space, something really important to that community that brings lots of people together to try and go through this kind of ownership process. So we found that that's put communities in a pretty strong position when the COVID crisis happened, because they'd already been through quite a kind of significant process of tackling something which can be quite complex. So we've got lots of case studies on our website, but we also produced a report which you can find on our website called Built-in Resilience, which we published a couple of months ago. And it was a journalist that pulled that report together for us. And we were saying, why are community landowners, why have they been so effective? Why are lots of people asking us that? But he was saying, it's pretty obvious if a community can go through a process of buying an estate or a ferry or a woodland, learning how to put up a hydro scheme or wind turbines, bringing in tens of thousands of pounds, sometimes millions of pounds in the case of some of our members. If they could do all of that, then figuring out how to, set up a prescription delivery service in 24 hours or organising grocery deliveries in comparison with something that's relatively straightforward for them. We also noticed that Ben Thompson, a Highland councillor, he was commenting to say that he was less worried about places where there was community land ownership in terms of communities' ability to respond, because all of the work that they had done over the past kind of 5 to 10 years was really had put in a lot of kind of strong processes, resilience planning that would put them in a really strong position. So he was likening the Isle of Egg, for example, to a world-class NGO in terms of its processes. So they were able to get things off the ground really quickly once COVID hit. So we've been, doing some thinking about why was community landowners' response so effective, and why have we had lots of other parts of society contacting us and contacting our members over the last few months, trying to learn what community landowners have been able to do, and how that could maybe be, how the lessons from that could be taken for other parts of society. So our take on it is that there's a number of different reasons why it's been so effective. So one of them is that the community landowners tend to have really deep roots into their community. So, they've been doing years of community engagement, particularly in the run-up to a buyout, where you have to really demonstrate that you've got the community on board, that you've talked to a really broad cross-section of your community. And that tends to continue even after communities own assets, because they tend to be doing a lot of community engagement on an ongoing basis. And it also means that quite often they've got large memberships in their community. So, for example, Galston Estate and Lewis, around 2/3 of their community are members of the organisation, and they have mailing lists, so they're able to reach people really quickly. They have really strong connections with other community organisations as well, which means that they've been able to kind of organise a kind of community-wide response. So really like people's community trust, they say that what they've been doing is helping the community help the community. So a lot of work that our members have been doing have been about coordinating and supporting other community organisations to be able to mobilise. They've been able to tap into the ingenuity of the wider community as well. So, during the run-up to a buyout, the extensive consultation is normally pretty open to people coming forward with ideas. So, for example, One Lock Head Community Trust, which just had their ballot a couple of weeks ago, and they did a feasibility study. They had 93 different ideas for businesses post-buyout from a community of 160 people. So communities tend to know who in their community, and who is an expert in setting up telephone systems, who's an expert in finding musicians to maybe put on some kind of uplifting Zoom session for people. So they tend to be very good at kind of tapping into the people in their community. The culture means that they can manage risk. So this has been particularly important with things like prescription deliveries, which can be seen as being quite risky, perhaps by the public sector. But when communities are taking on massive assets and running harbours and setting up wind turbines and things, they have processes in place to be able to assess and manage risk and actually put safe practices in place, and they can do that very quickly. They've got processes that could be loaned to other community organisations. So that could be bringing in grant funding through a community landowner's bank account. It could be that they've got simple things like route maps for how to do leaflet drops. They could have volunteer policies. So we've seen a lot of our members sharing their processes with other community organisations over the last couple of months. quite a few had income streams from their assets that could be used to meet the most urgent local needs. So I think this again is something really important about local ownership. That's not necessarily just ownership of land, but where communities have had ownership of renewables in particular, they've been able to very quickly use that money to make kind of rapid changes. So you look at Kayak Community Development Company, which is able to set up a crisis fund for local people very quickly after lockdown started. And then we have a lot of kind of sharing across our membership. So most of our members are very nice people and they tend to be very happy with sharing their ideas with other people. So one of our board members says his fantasy is that when he gets older, he can live in a nursing home that's being set up for community landowners, because they tend to be such nice people that it would be the ideal place to be in your old age. So this is our thoughts at the moment, but we are about to start doing some more in-depth research with 6 community landowners to try and dig a bit more deeply into why communities have been able to respond so quickly. And we're hoping that we can then use that to make a case for community land ownership and for more asset ownership by communities, but also that we can take that learning to be much more effective in how it might change wider society. So that's a very quick run through of our membership and what they've been doing to respond to COVID. So I will exit screen sharing and hand over to Linda.
Good morning. I shall just sort my technology. Good morning all. As Naomi said, I'm Linda Gillespie, Programme Manager for the Community Ownership Support Service. I thought I would start by showing you a kind of word cloud that's been taken from the DTAS members who were operational during COVID. So not unsurprisingly, community forms the kind of core of their response, but interestingly closely followed by uncertainty and change. I think it's fair to say that the kind of flexibility and innovation of the approaches taken have been a kind of hallmark of the community's response during COVID. So just, I thought I would touch on some of the kind of negative themes that have come through and also the positives, with just a few thoughts at the end about kind of what the future might hold. So in terms of kind of negative themes in relation to COVID, there's quite a bit of worry about the pressure on staff and volunteers as redundancies increase and the need for COVID, and the need for these services just at the point that the funding's reduced. And kind of one of the characteristics of this particular situation is quite often people who have never kind of accessed these types of services. So there's kind of challenges about navigating that, and it can be quite arduous for staff and volunteers in terms of responding to that. Other key point is that trading income has vanished. And this is particularly true of the very successful development trusts who have built up a range of kind of income generating services, quite often kind of hospitality based, and they've just literally disappeared overnight. So there's kind of not an expectation that funding is going to come back before 2021, and obviously people are burning through the reserves. There is, there will be some development trusts that don't make it through, and obviously that will take out buildings. I think it's also fair to say that the development trusts that participated in this had a kind of reasonable level of confidence that they were actually going to make it through. But I think it's also worth bearing in mind that there may well be restrictions on access to public buildings. So those groups that access schools to run part of their services, or kind of or public leisure facilities, could have restrictions on this. So there is the potential for there to be quite a lot of demand out there for access to assets and space, which also creates a bit of an opportunity. And then obviously there are funding challenges. The funding picture is pretty complex, and it's putting quite a lot of pressure on volunteers to navigate through that. In terms of the positive themes that the development trusts have kind of identified, and I'll put some examples below. Significant inter-community collaboration and cooperation. So West Calder Development Trust, for example, you know, an astonishing number of hot meals delivered with partner organisations. There's also been a recognition from the public sector about the role of community anchor organisations, and Linsay kind of mentioned that term about helping the community to help the community. So as an example of that, DTAS distributed 4.8 million to DTAS members through the Supporting Communities Fund, and that was administered by both DTAS and HIE in the HIE area. And then there's a new pipeline of volunteers. So there's been a kind of groundswell of community support with a slightly different profile of people coming through, with working age people, and there's a hope that this can be sustained with meaningful roles going forward. So obviously as people return to work, there may well be a drop-off, but there's a real opportunity with new people being aware of the community organisations in their locality. And this is quite an interesting one, which is the increased engagement with local businesses. You know, for example, the Greener Kirkcaldy Shop Happy effectively creates a kind of supermarket from independent stores on the high street. And there are a kind of range of other ones where development trusts have kind of linked in with private sector like Booker, big kind of wholesaler of food, to actually get food dropped off. So there's a kind of lot of really positive relationships that have kind of emerged with local businesses. I'm not saying they weren't there before, but the COVID has heightened the kind of potential opportunities around about that. And then the sort of the agility of response and kind of innovative solutions that have come through from a range of trusts. And indeed, one kind of development trust kind of talked about a kind of changing paradigm. So there is a sense that this is a kind of period of change. I listed some of the examples, you know, Healthy and Happy in Rutherglen developed a website within kind of an astonishingly small period of time, which detailed all the service providers. So if you have people that are not used to accessing services, being able to go onto a website just to see what's available makes a huge difference. You know, Swamp in Glasgow took on a case management system that was GDPR compliant, which allowed people to be dealt with all the support agencies to kind of feed into individuals. And then the Remakery in Govan Hill, in terms of distributing kind of reconditioned computers from Glasgow City Council. Obviously there's a significant increase in wellbeing services being supported, and that's something that member organisations feel very strongly they will be continuing to deliver, and there's kind of no indication that the requirement for these services is declining. So in terms of the future, and I'm happy to take questions on any of this, I think there will be increased opportunities for communities to make use of public assets. And that will be kind of access to assets and management agreements, leases or transfer. I think funding is going to be difficult. Funding is always difficult, but I think it's going to be particularly difficult going forward. Communities are going to have to look at their business models and look at kind of different approaches, particularly if kind of restrictions continue into the kind of longer term, or look at kind of delaying starts. And I think both communities of place and of interest need to be very strategic about the assets that they take on. There is potentially going to be quite a lot of assets available, and I think people have to be quite clear that they can develop them sustainably over the longer term. So that was my quick jaunt through our experiences at DTAS.
Thank you, Linda. I think we're going to bring Sarah-Jane in now, who's actually going to give us the perspective from a local community. So it's always good to hear from the support bodies, but we always think it's really important to hear from organisations on the ground as well. So if you're good to go, Sarah-Jane.
I am. Hi everybody, my name's Sarah-Jane Allsopp and I am Project Development Officer for Castle Douglas Development Forum. We're it's really good to hear the two presentations before, actually. It's kind of just cemented why I'm here, because our group is a living example of what's just been discussed. We actually have firsthand taken on land and dealt with the challenges and reacted to the challenges of COVID. So the presentation I'm going to give just takes you through the story of the charity, and hopefully you can see how the community land ownership is actually intertwined through the organisation and what a difference it's made. So yeah, I'm Project Development Officer for Castle Douglas and also a local freelance consultant. I'm involved in a few community land projects around our local area. Castle Douglas is a market town in southwest Scotland. It's got a population of about 4,200 people, but it's also a hub town for the district of the Stewartry. It supports a much wider rural agricultural population. If Castle Douglas loses services, it has a knock-on effect to these isolated rural communities which surround it. On the face of it, it's a wealthy market town. It's bucked the trend of the failing high street, but it still faces its issues. We've got an ageing population, and we've got some of the lowest wage rates in Scotland, and according to a recent Citizens Advice Bureau survey, we've got one of the highest costs of living in Scotland. Rural isolation is a big issue, and there's high suicide rates, particularly amongst young males in the agricultural sector. Of late, the high street is showing signs of struggle. In the past couple of years, there's been as many as 9 empty shops, which is unheard of in our area. It's below that national average, but this is still a massive blow to Castle Douglas. And obviously we're reeling from COVID at this time, so we'll need to see exactly how far that progresses in the next few months. The town has always had a vibrant civic events community held in, and a vibrant civic events programme held in July of each year. In 2000, the town was given the Food Town designation. So it's Dumfries and Galloway's. It's known for its links to food and drink and agriculture. The Food Town initiative was started in the early 2000s, and it was a traders initiative aiming at promoting Castle Douglas and its independent high street. At its peak, it had over 50 members, but many were uncomfortable with the Food Town mantle and felt that as we had such a diverse market high street, that the Food Town name perhaps wasn't suitable for their business. Relationships within this organisation and the traders started to become quite sour, and as a result, the Food Town organisation started to flail a little. Castle Douglas Development Forum was formed in 2012 as an umbrella organisation for the town with the sole aim of being there for the benefit of the town. In its first few years, it struggled from the stigma and the difficulties of the Food Town initiative. Its group of trustees were a small group and really quite a closed group. I joined in 2014. I was a local lass who had come back to the area, had a family and set up a local food business. And of course I was frustrated as to the lack of progress with Food Town, wanted to get on and become involved and really kind of try and shake things up. Well, to be honest, I had no idea of the work that had been done by my predecessors and of the difficulties that they'd been faced. So when I joined the group, I encountered a lack of understanding, a lack of goodwill between the traders and the community in its group, a lack of confidence in the town, and a lack of community spirit in a lot of ways. There was an awful lot of talk and an awful lot of wish to make a difference in the original Food Town and Development Forum meetings, but the attitude was defeatist, and there wasn't a lot of let's just go out and do this. I don't know whether by accident I ended up becoming chair of Castle Douglas Development Forum in 2015, and I just knew that we had to do something about this. We had this organisation there that was set and that should be at the core of our community, and so something had to change. I started talking to as many people as I can, started publicising the good things that the group already did, and I just went about trying new things. If I met negativity, I just had to turn around and say, well, at least I'm trying something. Come on, join us. If you've got a better idea, help us, but don't knock me for at least giving something a go. And I just wanted to create energy and bring together some of the wonderful people that we have in our area. So during that time, we got through to about October 2017. Visit Scotland announced the, oh, sorry, I've double clicked. Technology. Visit Scotland announced the closure of Castle Douglas's tourist information. It's a little building that sits on the very top of our town on the Market Hill next to the car park. When its closure was announced, it was just kind of the final straw for the town. Agriculture is declining, tourism is becoming a major industry, and the town just felt that the government body pulling out its support of the National Tourism Agency was about all they could take. In the winter of 2017, I made contact with Visit Scotland to see if we as a community organisation could become involved in that building, if we could take it on, but made no progress over that winter. I tried to keep in touch right the way through, didn't let it go, but we got well into 2018 and I didn't hold out much hope for anything happening. Suddenly, out of the blue, in May 2018, I received a phone call from a representative of Visit Scotland who said that they'd considered the possibility of us renting the centre for a trial period, and would I like to attend a meeting at the centre to meet and discuss what might happen going forward. I met with the representation of Visit Scotland at the site, going for a look round, and was handed the keys and said, it's yours for the season, let's know what you think. So that was 10 days before the late May bank holiday. We realised now was the time. If we're going to do something as a community, as an organisation, we had to take this opportunity and get on with it. The previous chair of the Development Forum came to me and said, do you realise what you're doing here, what you're taking on? I said, no, probably not, but we're going to give it a go anyway, and you'll see how things progressed as we go. So with 10 days notice, I managed to get together a small group of 3 or 4 people who were going to help me tidy out the building and get things going. On May 25th, 2018, the Heart of Galloway Visitor Centre, as we renamed it, opened its doors. It had a couple of shelves of leaflets that we'd managed to scrape together from a distribution company called Digit Distribution, and a very small display of products from around 10 local suppliers. From small acorns, well, things just really took off from there. Once it opened its doors, interest gathered in the project, and it grew arms and legs. Letters of support from the local community began to flood in. Press interest gathered in the project itself, and volunteers came to sign up to help. As of now, we have 14 regular volunteers, part-time member of staff, and we host over 50 local producers' products in a high-profile retail position at the top of our town. The centre itself acts as a box office for local theatres and events. It hosts community consultations for Dumfries and Galloway Council, our Heritage Lottery bids, Galloway Glens Landscape Partnership, and of course Castle Douglas Development Forum. It's become the local hub for information and travel planning, and last year it helped over 17,000 visitors progress on their journey or plan their journey around Dumfries and Galloway. It is a financially sustainable project. It's paying for itself. We've submitted the final asset transfer application to Visit Scotland, And just pre-COVID, it was due to go into the March meeting and be signed and sealed. Obviously, there's been a little bit of a delay, but we've no reason to believe that that will not become officially our building in the next few months. When I took on that project, I didn't have any idea of what kind of difference that would make to the community and to the people itself. The ripple effect started amongst our volunteers. You'll see on the left of the screen there, the lady knitting in pink is a volunteer called Steph. When we met Steph, she was asked if she would like to volunteer at the centre. She said she would try for an afternoon, didn't know if it was really for her. She attended and just absolutely loved coming in, loved the social interaction, and loved the responsibility of feeling that she was an ambassador for the town. She's now been on Visit Scotland training courses, she's a key holder, and she's an absolute core of the group that managed the visitor centre itself. We've got elderly volunteers who also enjoy the socialisation. As I said, we're a rurally isolated community, and just having that chance to get out for an afternoon and meet people and talk about the positivity in our area, the things that you can enjoy, has a great effect on those in our community. We also support a local charity which bridges the gap to employment for young people with autism. We have volunteers that come in to there, and we sell their products that group makes as well. From that chance encounter of taking on that piece of community land, that piece of building, that building, the charity itself has also transformed. Having a physical asset and a point of contact for the charity has raised awareness, provided people with a place to contact us as a group. We've learned so much about our town by having a constant presence and an access to the community. We've gone from being a small one-tier scale to a two-tier development trust and a member of Development Trust Association from Scotland. We have 9 trustees. We're now up to over 60 regular volunteers. Our meetings are vibrant and our remit is expanding all the time. We've rebranded, we've seen a growth in community confidence and in community spirit. People are coming to us to talk about ideas. They're coming to congratulate us on the increase in community spirit, and they're wanting to know how they can help and become involved. The charity now organises its packed programme of civic events, including a food festival. We've got a men's shed that the building's taken on in partnership with a local old folks home. We've launched a community journal, and it's now on its 7th issue. It's financially sustainable, and that goes out to around 3,000 homes. We run a monthly producers market. We're launching a park run. We're looking at heritage exhibitions, and we're also looking at revitalising Food Town for the traders and for the high street itself. We have a new initiative called Meet the Street, which we think will dovetail nicely with the original idea of Food Town initiative. And we have a keen group that are in the early stages of meeting and seeing how they're going to develop the town centre aspect of our community for themselves. So pre-COVID, you could say that Castle Douglas was motoring. We were building partnerships, we were developing, and we were looking to take on projects. Obviously, COVID-19 hit overnight, and we were contacted by a local food bank which placed parcels within our library. That food bank provided about 20 food parcels per month around the Stewartry, which is our district, and its delivery route through local libraries had obviously closed overnight. We were asked, can we help? And just as Linsay said at the start, the fact that we had that community capacity, that we had organised that project, that we had that building, meant that in under 48 hours, the visitor centre closed and the Heart of Galloway Food Bank opened, serving the entire Stewartry. We worked in partnership with Dumfries and Galloway Council and 3 other charities. We manage a group of 28 volunteers and probably cover around 600 volunteer miles a week. Within 10 weeks, we delivered over 800 food parcels. We have our local kitchen that's producing fresh and frozen food, and we're topping up with tinned goods to provide food for those in need in our area. This project has developed, obviously, as the need hasn't gone away. We're now moved into, within the last fortnight, we've moved into an empty shop premises in the town and are developing a new site which will have a project manager, help people to, in emergency, to access food, but then to access the support that they need to come off emergency food parcels. The front of the site is also going to host a pop-up shop for those who are self-employed, who perhaps need to trial their services or their new business in a high street location before taking the plunge to going full out and renting a shop or a premises. I'm actually just about to leave this seminar and go into interviews for that project development officer this afternoon. And the visitor centre itself has undergone a deep clean and is reopened as well as things start to return to normal. So this slide was written a few months ago and it was described as the future, but this is actually the current status of Castle Douglas Development Forum. What are we up to just now? So we have the food bank project that's developing into a project called Stepping Stones. Our visitor centre's up and running and all our previous initiatives. At the moment, we're undergoing a strategic town plan. As Linda said, there's a lot of assets going to be coming up, potentially suffering closures from the withdrawal of services that the council and other organisations can provide. So we've commissioned a study to look at how do we look at the assets that we've got, how do we look at the services that we need to provide, and how do we try to coordinate which assets we take on to provide the most efficient services and assistance within the town that we can in the future. We're fundraising for an inclusive play park, and one of our next community land projects is looking at Carlingwork Outdoor Activity Centre. This is our council-run education centre which sits at the bottom of our town and is provided outdoor education for all of the children in Dumfries and Galloway. Historically, I learned canoe there, and I think most of the children in our area have. As a result of council cutbacks, the closure was announced early last year. The asset is now sitting boarded up and closed, and we have submitted a stage 1 community asset transfer. We're out at consultation and are working up our business plan as we speak. My colleagues are in the office next door writing a report just now. Our community consultation had over 1,000 responses in 2 weeks, and more than 92% of people wanted to see the centre reopen, with only less than 5% thinking that we wouldn't be the body, less than 5% thinking that we were not the body to take that site on. We're working up our business plan just now, and it's as a person who's going through it right now, it isn't easy. It's not. We are struggling with the large grinding machine that is a local regional council, getting figures, etc. from them, getting information is taking a long time, and the process is slow. That's not unusual from having spoke to people in other organisations, and I think we're just working through it. It's about keeping good relationships. It's about understanding that the officers are just doing their job, and we're just trying to push through. So hopefully within the next year or so, we should have a community-run outdoor education centre, caravan park, and we should be in charge of our local amenity ground as well. In the next very early stages of development is a beautiful big hotel, which has probably one of the highest profile sites in our lovely long high street, the Douglas Arms. It's one of the saddest sights you'll see in any high street is the lovely heritage building that was a coaching inn, with windows falling out, with pigeons everywhere, with antisocial behaviour around the back, and it's been the source of much consternation within the local community. We conducted a recent straw poll which showed that the site provides at this time is providing a strong negative impact on the feelings of our local community. So as a group, we've submitted some funding and are currently doing an economic feasibility study into providing a food and drink support facility within Castle Douglas for those who work in the food and drink industry. The aim of this is obviously to bring meaning to Food Town, but also to provide a chance for education, for careers, and another attraction for visitors when they come to our town. As I say, it's a large piece of high-profile real estate that sits in our town, the Douglas Arms is, and we feel that it would be a perfect fit for this food and drink facility. We're at the stage of asking for support. We're getting letters of support. We've applied for some funding to have a look at the condition of the building and to see whether it is going to be a good fit for that for that project in the future. Can I just say that if we manage to pull this one off, I will feel that I have achieved something and that I've left a legacy, and we as a group have left a legacy within Castle Douglas. It's a much loved community asset, and if we can take that into community ownership and give it a new lease of life, it will be transformational for the town. I've asked for questions here, but I think we're going to do that later on. So I hope you can see from my presentation how the taking on of land and how the development of actual physical assets within our little town has brought our community together, and it is continuing to bring our community together. If there's one piece of advice I can give you as a community organisation, is take your time to build your group, to find out what the community wants and to get some capacity in there. If you try to do all of this voluntarily and take on these big sites, you will burn yourself out. I've been there, I've done it, I've done the 90-hour weeks for years and for the past few years, and you get to a stage where you realise that although you feel you should be doing this all out of the good of your heart, you have to bring in some and get funding to get some paid capacity to support you to do this. They're big projects, they require a level of professionalism, but they do make a lot of difference to your town, to your community, and they're worthwhile doing. Just take your time, consider your strategy, get funding for that core capacity, for that support, someone in an office that can grind through the paperwork and that can help you as a community organisation get to where you want to be. Okay, thank you, Naomi.
Thank you, Sarah-Jane. We're just, if you've got questions you want to start posing, please put them in. I know I've got a few that's raised a few questions for me. It was interesting as you were speaking, people listening in may not know the geography. I'm just 10 miles down the road from Sarah-Jane, and I have to say I'm particularly interested when you were also talking about the Douglas Arms. You'll know the community I live in has a very similar eyesore building on its key corner, and hey, if you can pull that off in Castle Douglas, I'd love Kakubi to be taking that on as it's our big eyesore building as our next challenge too. So it's always good to learn from other communities. I'm going to just ask a couple of just general questions and then start picking up the ones on the chat. I'm really interested in this sense of the ripple effect, and I just wondered perhaps if I could bring just Linda or Linsay in first, because I know there's some particular questions coming to you, Sarah-Jane. But I was running a session yesterday where actually someone in their community had started with a small energy initiative and actually has consequently gone on. I think they're now doing a community share offer around their tourist information centre. They've built 12 homes for the elderly because they were in a rural community. And I just wonder if your experience, Linsay or Linda, perhaps Linsay, if you come in first, have you also got other examples where you've really seen that ripple effect, even if communities have started off on a smaller project, that you've really seen them grow in their confidence and kind of feel then that they could take on bigger initiatives?
Yeah, I think it's kind of generally acknowledged that the hardest part of doing a community buyout is learning everything and figuring out who you need to go and speak to. And, you know, almost once you've cracked that, you're in a really strong position to do the same thing again. And I think a lot of communities find that when they have purchased their first asset, that the expectation is there from the wider community that they'll go on to do more. So just in my own community, we purchased our shop in December, and we've just taken the lease on 2 community gardens, and the people are suggesting we take over the pub, which is closed down. So I think it just changes. It's not even the people who are necessarily hands-on in the project. It changes the whole community's expectations, and also the wider community confidence that they can actually kind of take control of things, where previously they might have just been subject to very top-down regeneration. Or so yeah, it definitely has a massive effect on the whole community whenever it happens.
Thanks, Linsay. Has that been something you've found, Linda? Because, you know, communities have different levels of confidence, I guess, when they start. And how do we, you know, I guess if they're starting that small project, does it then build that confidence in your experience too?
Yes, I think, I mean, and that's definitely true of the development trusts. So the kind of that model, and Sarah-Jane's just kind of typified that. I think it's also important, particularly around about asset transfer. It can just be one particular building that a community is interested in, and one particular amenity. So there is no requirement for you necessarily to act as a platform to layer on additional asset ownership. I mean, I think one of the interesting things about COVID is about the joined upness of community organisations, that they've come together. I think whilst there's no requirement, particularly if you're a community of interest, for you to go on and secure more and more assets, I think it's kind of beholden on all community groups to try and come together to kind of work more collectively, but that there's not a requirement for you as a group yourself to take on a lot of assets other than the one that you're actually running. Yeah. And that's the difference with that's the difference with asset transfer, is that it supports communities of place and of interest, that they can access the rights.
No, thank you. I think that's useful to clarify and get people to understand as well. And there is lots of support out there through COS and through Community Land Scotland as well. So I think knowing that groups aren't on their own when they're trying to go through these projects is important. I'm interested in confidence, perhaps externally as well, and maybe Sarah-Jane, you give a sense of this. Obviously, we've spoken a bit about kind of communities growing in confidence. Do you think that the way that local communities have kind of stepped up and dealt with COVID in their local communities has also increased the confidence of external agencies in what communities are capable of?
Absolutely. We've discussed this quite a lot as a charity, as we've been dealing and progressing with these statutory agencies around our land projects, around any of the projects that we've got. You sometimes get the undertone that it's a little community organisation, that you won't know as well, you know, what you're doing as much as a statutory organisation would. That changed overnight with COVID, when we had the opportunity to open up this food bank. The council were immediately coming to say to us, you have the resource, you have the understanding, we need to work with you with this. And that relationship just equalised, and we're actually on a much better footing. Not that we didn't have a good relationship, but we just feel that we're being taken more seriously, that we are now a sensible voice at the table regarding conversations within our community. The council came to us again regarding the restart plan, discussions for changes to make in the high street and things like that. Now, that wouldn't have happened before. So I think they've realised that we are ready and able, that we do know how to put processes in place, that we do have policies, and that we do have some pretty experienced people who understand actually what the people in our town and our surrounding area want, need, and just how to get it done as well. They have the contacts. There isn't the procurement process. Well, obviously there's pure procurement processes, but there isn't the paperwork. We can just phone up someone and say, could you help with this? Whereas a council just can't get the authority to do that, to swing into action. It's a much slower, lumbering organisation. And I think they've realised that we both need each other, which has been refreshing.
No, it's been interesting, I think, seeing the agility of small organisations alongside the scale of some of the bigger ones, and actually a recognition that neither of those is the overall solution, and how do they work together has been quite interesting. There's some very specific questions coming in, and I don't know whether our panelists have had a chance to see any of those, so I'll just point them out to people. So there's a few questions just around asset transfer and the costs and how you raise finance for that, which I wondered if particularly there's one about kind of looking at leases, and so I'm just going to scroll up to the top and start with the lease question I spotted first, if I just go into my Q&A. So did you get a lease prior to the asset transfer, and how easy or difficult was it to get the lease? So that's a particular question, I think, to you, Sarah-Jane, and then there's some more general ones just around funding for asset transfer initiatives.
Yes, we did get an initial lease. We had a token rent of £1 for the first year. We were lucky in that our project was quite early doors with Visit Scotland offloading some of their visitor centres, and I think they wanted to trial. They had a community group that was banging on their door asking to do something, and I think they thought, right, well, we'll just give this a go. So we negotiated an interim lease where we had use of the building for a year. We had to pay utilities, keep it wind and watertight, and they kept the policy on their buildings and insurance, etc., because we weren't the owners. And yeah, that's how we progressed from there.
Thank you, that's helpful. Just in terms of the more general questions just around funding, so there's one just about kind of looking even at that kind of early stage in terms of looking at feasibility, and how do you kind of get money for that initial stage, and then what about kind of as you move on, and how do organisations really start to get pots of money together to do land transfer or asset transfer? I'll go to Linda. I think you put your hand up.
Yes. Just round about kind of feasibility and consultation. A lot of that actually can be done by communities themselves. A lot of that early stage work is actually often better done by communities in terms of just getting a sense of actually what people need, what people's views are about particular assets and services. More recently, Enterprise Accelerator has, which has run through the Scottish SCA, has supported the kind of business planning elements of that. And if it's a lease, then we employ somebody that's a property solicitor, and they will help with the terms of a lease in terms of that kind of giving advice on kind of what you're actually signing up for. So that, but generally, in terms of securing funding directly to do that, then it's quite a challenging environment.
Thanks, Linda. Maybe to Linsay, someone's just asking, are you better almost looking for lots of small pots of money or trying to apply for one large grant? And I guess some of the answer is dependent on what's available, which may be changing, but I didn't know, Linsay, if you've got any kind of thoughts around that.
Well, certainly the type of organisations that we work with, which are geographic communities, the bulk of funding for feasibility studies has come through the Land Fund over the last few years. I mean, communities still do need to find some match funding for that, which they've done in a variety of different ways, but the Scottish Land Fund certainly been the go-to place recently. I mean, as Linda was saying, the expectation is you would have done some work up front just to demonstrate it's just not you and a couple of people who've come up with this idea, and it's not supported more generally. But then you would be going on to do full feasibility work, broader community engagement, and that the expectation would be that that is usually funded through stage one of the Scottish Land Fund.
But that's for ownership, if you're actually just looking for ownership of the asset rather than kind of leasing.
Yeah, and sadly we're all waiting to hear what the future of the Scottish Land Fund will be. So for those of you who are in the middle of that application, you'll know that I think it closes for applications the end of August. So you've got literally a couple of days. So it's all quite tight, and money has to be spent, correct me if I'm wrong, Linsay or Linda, but by the end of March, is that right, Linsay?
Well, there's the stage one process for feasibility studies will stay open until they run out of money, basically. So that the idea is that that will form a pipeline for Scottish Land Fund next year if it comes back, which we hope it will do. But yeah, stage two, that is about to close, but the majority of those would have already had to go through stage 1, so will be in the system. That is about to close with money having to be spent by the end of March. Yeah.
Thank you. It's helpful to get that clarification. I think I was learning bits there as well, so good to know. And actually encouraging to know that they're still keeping it open for that feasibility. It sends hopefully a strong message of intention about the future. Though I guess, as you pointed to in your presentation, into that challenge of knowing about future funding at the moment is going to be quite difficult, because we know so much has been thrown into COVID responses. So it's probably thrown a lot of kind of broader finance questions in the air a little bit.
Well, and there's, I mean, even pre-COVID, there are challenges around about development funding. So kind of communities that are looking to take on buildings do kind of need to give a bit of thought to whether there's options to kind of develop on a phase basis, or kind of slightly different ways of securing money rather than the kind of traditional big block grants. Of course, there will be projects that do require big block grants to get off the ground, but I think we just kind of need to be kind of light of foot in the particular environment. Yeah.
I'm going to move off funding in case, I mean, feel free to post particular questions coming in. I know people are giving an eye, but I've seen there's been a couple of questions just around kind of community consultation. So there was one that was more general about how did you undertake some of that community consultation work when you started out, Sarah-Jane? And then there's perhaps one a bit more specific about how do you kind of get a few of the people who might be against what you're doing really on board, and how do you pull communities together?
It's really about communication. So we just started by press releases, by making people aware that there was a group of people who were interested in this project, letting them know that it existed. Through social media and the traditional news outlets. We then progressed to our local events. So our producers market, we had a stall, and a couple of us stood with some post-it notes and some pictures of the project, and just said to people, do you have any ideas? What this is a project that's possible. Can you write down any words? Have you got any suggestions? And I've got photographs of, we had about 300 or 400 bits of sticky notes all over by the end of a Sunday afternoon. We then took that on and we got together a group of about 50 people who were already involved in other agencies and organisations, or were heads of groups, and we sat down and had a one-to-one with them. So we had a group of standard questions about the project that we took some time to work on, what we wanted to know, what we needed to find out, and we went through phone interviews, Zoom meetings, face-to-faces, the ones that we managed to get done before COVID. We just asked them if they felt there was a need for the project, if it fitted in with anything they were doing, would they like to come on board, did they think that it was something their members were interested in. We took the results from those and then we created a questionnaire. So standard SurveyMonkey questionnaire, which again, because we spoke to some people, we had some ideas of the general themes that people were interested in and what we felt that they wanted to see this project would become. It was about 12, 14 questions. And we sent that out through social media, but then we also used our community journal, because we're aware, obviously with our aging population, with those that are in poverty, maybe can't get online, our journal gets delivered through the door of 3,000 homes and goes out to the rural communities in sites like phone boxes, community shops. So we stuffed paper copies and left those pick-up boxes as a return for the survey. And that's how we found out what everyone wanted and needed. It threw up some interesting things. There were people who supported the project in general, but maybe who weren't that aware of what Castle Douglas Development Forum did. So obviously there's a key group in the town who work really hard, who maybe know, oh, the name, yeah, that's right, they put on the civic events, they do that. But then we got back that question, well, we don't really know who you are and if you've got the capacity to take on the activity centre. So then we're actually reacting to that now and are designing an online webinar, which we will, depending on whether the public, whether the lockdown is eased, whether we can hold a public meeting, but we're just going to do a session a bit like I've done today. Here's who Castle Douglas Development Forum are, here's what they do, here's the staff that we have, here's the things that we can manage and take on. So we're learning all the time about how our community sees us, about any gaps, about any things that we're not doing right, and we're responding to that. So hopefully those that I've said that know that they maybe don't support the organisation, once they've realised that we're not just a wee group that sit and have tea in the local cafe, that there's a lot of hard-working people that are organising this behind, and we've got government funding, we're well supported, they will come on board as well. It's all about the communication, it's just about being open. There's no hidden agenda, there's no hidden strategy, just tell your community what you're doing. Yeah. And that they will get engaged, they will respond.
I think it's interesting as well. I think that's a sense of when you have got that asset and people have seen that you've got a building or something in the town and you're not just a talking shop, maybe it's easier to engage as well. And I think sometimes people are happy to engage when they see there's action, but they don't just want to engage in meetings. So it can play a real part, I think, having that asset to kind of show what you're capable of.
Need to do a little bit of press beforehand as well. Don't just send out a dry survey. Have cheery articles, have social media posts. See if you can get the local telly just to spark interest, so that people, when that dry piece of paper survey comes out, people go, oh, I know what this is, I want to become involved. Yeah.
I'm just looking through, keeping an eye. There's a couple of other little questions, and I know I did check with our panelists, so we're all right for an extra 10 minutes, but I know there's other meetings people have to get onto. So I know, Sarah-Jane, we've got you for about another 3 minutes. So if anyone's got a particular question for Sarah-Jane, do put it through. I'm going to just ask one, maybe if I can, just to Linsay, and it's about looking at whether there's opportunities for community of homeowners to own the common land on a housing estate. And have you seen kind of those kind of examples in urban environments? And I think they're looking at it very much in terms of then being able to kind of have a bit of ownership and sense of control over common spaces, rather than having to pay, I guess, management fees when they don't feel that actually the spaces that they then end up with are what they want. Is there any examples you might have on that?
It's something we get asked quite a lot. So it depends what scale you're talking about, because some of the things we get asked about is, it might be a community of 6 houses that wants to buy some common space, and then you're looking at the practicalities of that, of going through the whole community buyout process. Obviously it's down to community to decide, but I think it can be more complex. It's a kind of cost benefit analysis whether they want to go through that whole process. So obviously there's lots of communities, even very small communities, that own land. So I think our smallest member is on the Isle of Rum, which has got a population of 30 people, and they've managed to go through an ownership project. But that's the kind of thing that I think if someone wants to give us a ring or give DTAS a ring and talk through, we could talk them through the pros and cons of that, because it is quite a complex decision.
Yes, we have examples of that, and we have an example in Glasgow where a group is the land wrap that wraps around the kind of housing estate was with the Greenbelt Trust and is now moved to a private owner and has been neglected. So the kind of neighbouring development trust is going through the community right to buy for abandoned and neglected and detrimental land, and will probably hold that land for the community rather than the community having to set up an organisation itself. So yeah, we've got a couple of examples of that actually, if anybody wants to get in touch.
I can't reiterate enough.
Carling work as well is common good land. Our outdoor activity centre, our park and our caravan park is common land. So we are now deciding around it's inalienable, so it has to go to the sheriff. We are now in the process of saying would it be better to approach a lease for this rather than an actual purchase. I mean, obviously we are effectively the modern, our development trust is effectively the modern common good, but it's something that you have to work through. And can I just say to everybody, DTAS, the support they've given us have been fantastic. I feel that I've got someone to pick up the phone that can give an example that's been through it before. If you can get involved with DTAS, COS, Community Enterprise Scotland, any of these groups, it's just you just feel like you've got someone in your corner, and it really is helpful. No question's a stupid question, they're just there to help. So engage with these people.
Yeah, I think I was saying on a session I ran yesterday, the only stupid question is the one you're dying to ask, but you never ask. That's the only daft question. You'll never get the answer to the one that you don't raise your voice and ask. And there is so much support out there. In fact, I was picking up on one of the other little questions. It's just about looking at whether you're better in terms of being a charity or going down the community share route. And again, there's lots of support out there from Community Share Scotland, and I know I'll be running a session in a couple of weeks for Social Investment Scotland, where we've got Community Share Scotland on, very much talking about how to use the community shares model. And we're doing that against looking at it from an investment perspective. So that support's there as well. And I know that Linda and the team would also have perspectives. The Community Share Scotland team is also a part of DTAS, so they're all well connected and talk to each other well. So that's good. I've just got one, I guess, conscious of time. Sarah-Jane, I know you might have to just skip off. So if you disappear, then don't feel you can't. And I'm just going to ask one last question, and it's perhaps looking at the future. And it's looking at the kind of the role of communities in terms of recovery. I think we've shown that we've got that sense of resilience. What do you really think is there for communities in terms of helping communities in recovery post-COVID? And if Sarah-Jane, you want to just answer it first, and then you can get, unless you've got to go.
No, that's fine. No, I've got 2 minutes.
Cool. And if you give a perspective, and then you can shoot off, and then I'll just get Linda and Linsay to finish off on that for today. So sorry, I got distracted there. Your question is about how we help communities recover, how we carry on. I think it's been important for us we took on that food bank project overnight, and it's been important for us just not to drop it and say, right, we're reopening again, we're done and dusted. The need's still there. In fact, our food parcel demand has increased by 1/3 in the last fortnight yet again. So it's just continuing to quietly say, if someone in your community needs help, our organisation is here. Your communities are all different. You guys know. You'll be sitting here going, we maybe could, people could do with that. Whether it is connectivity, whether it's someone just making phone calls, things like that. It's about just trying to keep things going and continue that support, rather than saying the world's opened up again, we're back to our day job. Because now's the difficult time, in my eyes. Yeah, no, thank you, Sarah-Jane. That was a useful perspective. And I think, we've focused a lot talking about how communities have reacted, and the word pivot's been used quite a lot. And I know from our experience with our members, we know many are still struggling out there. And I think we have to not forget that this is still a challenging environment, as much as organisations have shown they can be resilient and that they're able to pivot and quickly respond. They're also challenged. And I think it was interesting going back to your presentation, Linda. I think the ones that were trading saw the drop off of income very quickly with COVID. But actually, I think the challenge for those who had funding, and funders were very responsive when COVID hit and almost lifted restrictions for people and said, just do what your community needs. But actually those organisations reliant on funding will find their challenges come as funders have perhaps distributed more money in COVID responses and have done things differently as well. So we're in for some tough times still, I think. Yeah. So just a last perspective in terms of recovery, maybe from you, Linsay, that ambition is there? Do you still think for communities to go down the ownership route? Yeah, I mean, we're kind of hopeful that community landowners have really demonstrated what they can do. I mean, we know that community landowners are amazing at Community Land Scotland, but some of the things they've said have amazed us as well. So really hoping that support does continue and perhaps even grows for community landowners. As Linda was saying, a lot of our members are talking about how do they support the wider economy through that recovery period. And I think that's the big talking point at the moment, but it's such a fast changing environment. I think it's quite challenging to answer that at the moment, but certainly there's a lot of interest and ideas amongst communities about how they could take on that role of trying to coordinate the kind of local economic recovery. So I think that's probably
the next thing to keep an eye on.
Yeah, no, thank you, Linsay. And Linda, perhaps the last few comments from you, and then we'll draw the session to a close.
I mean, I would agree with both Sarah-Jane and Linsay in terms of kind of the future. For me, I would love to see the kind of relationships that have been built up across the kind of public sector and actually the private sector developed, and that wasn't just for this crisis only, and that was able to mature, because ultimately asset transfers will be sustainable in a kind of with relationships with the public sector round about delivery and the private sector round about new models. So for the future, I would hope that we would be able to build on that.
No, thank you so much. I know we've had lots of comments just coming in saying that the session's been really helpful, which is really good to know. Linsay and I first spoke about doing a session on community land and assets, gosh, back in the middle of March, I think, Linsay. So it's great to have been able to finally put this one on today. Just a big thank you to all of our speakers, Linsay, Linda and Sarah-Jane, who's left. And thank you for a brilliant session. And we'll see you again next week. If you are interested in finding out more about kind of community assets and anchor type approaches, I would also encourage you to join the CEIS conference, which is on next Wednesday. And DTAS are also running a session, I know, as part of that, as one of the breakouts. So there's lots of good stuff there as well. And it's a free conference. So we'll be at that next week instead of running our own webinar. And it'd be great to see you there. So thank you both so much. And thank you all for coming along today.
Bye.